Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the next thrilling and exciting, inimicable, amicable, amnesiac episode of the taciturn and saturnine reading cow for another world with bedtime stories for the baby thing show that this is. And we continue the inevitable saga of Stenka Razin. They should have said that backwards. It should have been raising a stinka. Raising a stink. Okay. So, as you remember last time, at the beginning of 1668, it defeated the Voivode, the one who goes to fight Yakov Bezobrazov, sent against him from Astrakhan, the, the Khan of the stars. And in the spring, embarked on a predatory expedition into Dagestan and Persia, which lasted for 18 months. There's Stenka Razin in a contemporary English engraving. How inspiring. Russia began the 17th century with the Time of Troubles, which lasted from 1598 to 1613. This time marked the end of the Rurik dynasty and the beginning of the Romanov dynasty, which would eventually end with the October Revolution and the execution of the last Tsar Nicholas II and the Tsarevich Alexei Nikolaevich in 1918. Michael Romanov, Tsar from 1613 to 1645, and his son Alexis, Tsar from 1645 to 1676, both strove to strengthen the power of the Tsar in order to stabilize the country after the turmoil of the Time of Troubles. As a result, the Zemsky Sobor and the Boyar Council, two other bodies of government in Russia, slowly lost influence. The Russian population went from 15 years of near anarchy to the reigns of two strong centralizing autocrats. In addition, a deep divide existed between the peasantry and the nobility in Russia. Recent changes in the treatment and legal standing of peasants, including institutionalization of serfdom in the Law Code of 1649, contributed to the unrest among the peasantry. Fancy that! The Don Cossacks, a lower-class group that lived independently near the Don River and whom the Tsar's government supplied in exchange for defending Russia, led Razin's rebellion. Historian Paul Avrich characterizes Razin's revolt as a curious mixture of brigandage and revolt, similar to other popular uprisings of the period. Razin revolted against the traitor boyars rather than the Tsar. The Cossacks supported the Tsar because they worked for him. Departure from the Don. In 1667, Razin gathered a small group of Cossacks and left the Don for an expedition in the Caspian Sea. He aimed to set up a base in Yaitsk, now known as Oral, located in Kazakhstan, on the Ural River, and plunder villages from there. However, Moscow learned of Razin's plans and attempted to stop him. As Razin traveled down the Volga River to Tsaritsyn, the voivodas of Astrakhan warned Andrei Unkovsky, the voivoda or governor of Tsaritsyn, of Razin's arrival and recommended that he not allow the Cossacks to enter the town. See what he can do about it. Unkovsky attempted to negotiate with Razin, but Razin threatened to set fire to Tsaritsyn if Unkovsky interfered. When he encountered a group of political prisoners being transported by the Tsar's representatives on his way from the Don to the Volga, Razin reportedly said, "I shall not force you to join me, but whoever chooses to come with me will be a free Cossack. I have come to fight only the boyars and the wealthy lords. As for the poor and plain folk, I shall treat them as brothers." When Razin sailed by Tsaritsyn, Unkovsky did not attack, possibly either because he felt that Razin posed a threat or because the guards of Tsaritsyn Tsaritsyn sympathized with Razin's Cossacks. This incident gave Razin the reputation of an invincible warrior endowed with supernatural powers. He continued his travels down the Volga and into the Caspian Sea, defeating several detachments of Straitsi, or armed guardsmen. In July 1667, Razin captured Yeysk by disguising himself and some of his companions as pilgrims to pray at the cathedral. Once inside Yeysk, they opened the gates to the rest of the troops to enter and occupy the city. The opposition, sent to fight Razin, felt reluctant to do so because they sympathized with the Cossacks. In the spring of 1668, Razin led the majority of his men down the Yaik River, also known as the Ural River, while a small portion stayed behind to guard Yeysk. However, the government defeated Razin's men in Yeysk, and Razin lost his base there. The Persian expedition. After losing Yeysk, Razin sailed south down the coast of the Caspian Sea to continue his pillaging. He and his men then attacked Persia. That's Iran, folks. Okay. For those of you that don't know. Okay. Failing to capture the well-defended fortress port of Darband in present-day Dagestan, his forces moved south to attack the small port of Badkuba, present Baku, located on the Absheron Peninsula in the present-day Republic of Azerbaijan. But at Rasht, in the southwest Caspian Sea in modern Iran, the Persians killed roughly 400 Cossacks in a surprise attack. Razin went to Isfahan to ask the Shah for land in Persia in exchange for loyalty to the Shah, but departed on the Caspian for more pillaging before they could reach an agreement. Razin arrived in Farahabad on the southern shore of the Caspian Sea in Iran and masqueraded as a merchant in the city for several days before he and his men pillaged the city for 2 days. That winter, the Cossacks, with Razin, fended off starvation and disease on the Mian Kalech Peninsula. In the spring of 1669, Razin built a base on the eastern side of the Caspian Sea and began raiding Turkmen villages. Then, in the spring of 1669, he established himself on the Isle of Suina, off which, in July, he annihilated a Persian fleet sent against him. Stenka Razin, as he was generally called, had now become a potentate with whom princes did not disdain to treat. In August 1669, he reappeared at Astrakhan and accepted a fresh offer of pardon from Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich there. The common people were fascinated by his adventures. The lawless Russian border region of Astrakhan, where the whole atmosphere was predatory and many people were still nomadic, was the natural milieu for such rebellion as Razin's. Next part, Open Rebellion, the Stepan Razin Rebellion. Okay, in 1670, Razin, while ostensibly on his way to report at the Cossack headquarters on the Don, openly rebelled against the government, capturing Cherkassk and Tsaritsyn. And after capturing Tsaritsyn, Razin sailed up the Volga with his army of almost 7,000 men. The men traveled toward Cherny Yar, a government stronghold between Tsaritsyn and Astrakhan. Razin and his men swiftly took Cherny Yar when the Cherny Yar Streltsy rose up against their officers and joined the Cossack cause in 1670. That's what you get. You got to take care of your own. Yeah. On June 24th, he reached the city of Astrakhan. Astrakhan, Moscow's wealthy window on the east, occupied a strategically important location at the mouth of the Volga River on the shore of the Caspian Sea. Razin plundered the city despite its location on a strongly fortified island and the stone walls and brass cannons that surrounded the central citadel. The local Streltsy's rebellion allowed Razin to gain access to the city. After massacring all who opposed him, including 2 princes, Prozorovsky, and giving the rich bazaars of the city over to pillage, he converted Astrakhan into a Cossack republic, dividing the population into thousands, hundreds, and tens, with their proper officers, all of whom were appointed by a Vesha general or general assembly, whose first act was to proclaim Razin their Gosudar, sovereign. After a 3-week carnival of blood and debauchery, Razin quit Astrakhan with 200 barges full of troops. His aim was to establish the Cossack Republic along the whole length of the Volga as a preliminary step towards advancing against Moscow. Saratov and Samara were captured, but Simbirsk defied all efforts, and after 2 bloody encounters close at hand on the banks of the Sviaga River, October 1st and 4th, Razin was ultimately routed by the army of Yuri Baryatinsky and fled down the Volga, leaving the bulk of his followers to be extirpated by the victors. But the rebellion was by no means over. The emissaries of Razin, armed with inflammatory proclamations, had stirred up the inhabitants of the modern governments of Nizhny Novgorod, Tambov, and Penza, and penetrated even as far as Moscow and Novgorod. It was not difficult to stir the oppressed population to revolt by promising deliverance from their yoke. Razin promised that his object was to root out the boyars and all officials, to level all ranks and dignities, and establish Cossackdom, with its corollary of absolute equality, throughout the Muscovy. Even at the beginning of 1671, the outcome of the struggle was doubtful. 8 battles had been fought before the insurrection showed signs of weakening, and it continued for 6 months after Razin had received disquietus. At Simbirsk, his prestige had been shattered. Even his own settlements at Saratov and Samara refused to open their gates to him, and the Don Cossacks, hearing that the Patriarch of Moscow had anathematized Razin, also declared against him. The Tsar sent troops to suppress the revolt. As Paul Avrich notes in Russian Rebels 1600 to 1800, the brutality of the repressions by far exceeded the atrocities committed by the insurgents. That's oft the case. The Tsar's troops mutilated the rebels' bodies and displayed them in public to serve as a warning to potential dissenters. In 1671, Stepan and his brother Frol Razin were captured at Kagalnik Fortress by Cossack elders. They were given over to Tsarist officials in Moscow, and on the 6th of June 1671, following the announcement of the verdict against him, Stepan Razin was quartered on the scaffold on Bolotnaya Square. A sentence of death was read aloud. Razin listened to this calmly, then turned to the church, bowed in 3 directions, passing the Kremlin and the Tsar, and said, "Forgive me." The executioner then proceeded to first cut off his right hand to his elbow, then his left foot to the knee. His brother, Frol, witnessing Stepan's torment, shouted out, "I know the word in the matter of the sovereign, that is, I am willing to inform upon those disloyal to the Tsar." Stepan shouted back, "Shut up, dog." These were his last words. After them, the executioner hurriedly cut off his head. Razin's legs and head, according to the testimony of the Englishman Thomas Hebden, were struck on 5 specially placed stakes. The confession helped Frol to postpone his own execution, though 5 years later he was executed by beheading at the same place in Bolotnaya Square. Implications. Razin originally set out to loot villages, but as he became a symbol of peasant unrest, his movement turned political. Razin wanted to protect the independence of the Cossacks and to protest an increasingly centralized government. The Cossacks supported the Tsar and autocracy, but they wanted a Tsar that responded to the needs of the people and not just those of the upper class. By destroying and pillaging villages, Razin intended to take power from the government officials and give more autonomy to the peasants. However, Razin's movement failed and the rebellion led to increased government control. The Cossacks lost some of their autonomy, and the Tsar bonded more closely with the upper class because both feared more rebellion. On the other hand, as Avrich asserts, Razin's revolt awakened, however dimly, the social consciousness of the poor, gave them a new sense of power, and made the upper class tremble for their lives and possessions. And well, they should. At the time of the Russian Civil War, the famous writer and white emigre Ivan Bunin compared Razin to Bolshevik leaders, writing, "Good God, what striking similarity there is between the time of Stenka and the pillaging that is going on today in the name of the Third International." In Russian language, culture, and folklore, Stenka Razin is sung in several Russian songs, including in particular in the popular folk song Stenka Razin. The song recounts that Razin aboard the ship tames the princess and his men, accuse him of no more fighting. He teases her one last time. Right after the ejaculation, he escapes the loins of the princess and throws her into the river. Ah! The killing of the princess after the act of love is for Razin a sacrifice to the river Volga. Razin is the subject of a symphonic poem by Alexander Glazunov, Symphony No. 8 by Mayakovsky, Opus 26, 1925, a cantata by Shostakovich, Opus 119, The Execution of Stepan Razin, 1964, a poem by Yevgeny Yevtushenko, and a novel, I Have Come to Give You Freedom, by Vasily Shukshin. Stenka Razin is the hero of a popular Russian folk song, Ponizovaya Volnitsa, better known to the words by the words Volga Volga Mat Rodnaya Iza Ostrava Nastrezin, and simply Stenka Razin. The words were written by Dmitry Sadovnikov in 1883. The music is folk. The song gave title to the famous Soviet musical comedy Volga Volga. The melody was used by Tom Springfield in the song The Carnival Is Over that placed The Seekers at number 1 in 1965 in Australia and the UK. And not only that, folks, the lyrics of the song were dramatized in one of the very first Russian narrative films, Stenka Razin, directed by Vladimir Romashkov in 1908. The film lasts about 10 minutes. The screenplay was written by Vasily Goncharov, and the music, the first film music to be specially written to accompany a silent film, was written by Mikhail Ippolitov Ivanov. A version of this song is also performed by Doukhobors in Canada. The song was featured in the film Mr. Denton on Doomsday, 1958. And let's see if we can get this in the English language version. Okay, here we go. This is not a translation, it's the English language version of the song. From beyond the wooded island to the river wide and free, proudly sail the arrow-breasted ships of Cossack yeomanry. On the first is Stenka Razin, with his princess by his side. Drunk he holds a marriage revel, clasping close his fair young bride. From behind there comes a murmur, he has left his sword to woo. One short night, and Stenka Razin has become a woman too. Stenka Razin hears the murmur of his discontented band, and the lovely princess he has circled with his hand. His brows are drawn together as the waves of anger rise, and the blood comes rushing swiftly to his piercing jet-black eyes. I will give you all you ask for, head and heart, and life in hand. And his voice rolls out like thunder out across the distant land. And she, lowering her eyes, not alive nor dead is she, silently listens to the cries of the ataman groggy. Volga, Volga, mother Volga, wide and deep beneath the sun, you have never seen such a present from the Cossacks of the Don. so that peace may reign forever in this band. So free and brave, Volga, Volga, mother, Volga, make this lovely girl a grave. Oh, so free and brave. Okay, in this band, so free and brave, Volga, Volga, mother, Volga, make this lovely girl a grave. Now with one swift mighty motion he has raised his bride on high, and has cast her where the waters of the Volga roll and sigh. Dance, you fools, and let's be merry. What is this that's in your eyes? Let us thunder out a shanty to the place where beauty lies. From beyond the wooded island to the river wide and free, proudly sail the arrow-breasted ships of Cossack yeomanry. One of his atamans, Alina Arzamatskaya, was a former nun. Razin is the subject of the landmark book Chief of the Cossacks. I would be interested, and I recommend folks that are interested in Russian to go and see what's the difference between the English version of the song and this words in Russian. But we don't have time for that right now because we have once again reached the end of the next thrilling and exciting, adventurous episode of the Reading Cow from Another World with Stenka Razin. And see you next time. And until then, goodbye.